Everything began in the boy's bathroom, the only place that served as his oasis for a bit of peace and quiet. However, on this abnormal day, he found Kojima, his attractive teacher, inside taking. It turned out that Kojima decided to use the men's bathroom because the women's was being cleaned. She promised she would forget the incident only if Sato could exit the stall immediately. Upon hearing this, Sato tried, but the lock was jammed and he couldn't get out. Kojima had always been the typical mean teacher that all students feared. As soon as he remembered this reputation, Sato immediately started banging on the door. In his mind, he had already imagined how she would tie him up with chains and cut the size of his sausage with a chainsaw. At that moment, the bathroom door opened. Sato saw this as his opportunity and was about to shout for help, but Kojima pulled him close to her. Then she instructed him not to make any noise, pointing out that a teacher and a student caught together in the bathroom would definitely be a headline on CNN. However, the boy was already immersed in the pleasure of holding those divine cushions. When Sato finally tried to exit, Kojima was already feeling a sense of happiness. So she asked him to exit slowly to avoid flooding her peaches, which he did. But at that moment, Sato noticed that Kojima's usual stern tone had suddenly become sweet and calm, which surprised him. He also observed that she was sweating excessively and her breasts were more bouncy than normal. Suddenly, Kojima made the loudest noise of happiness, flooding everything with creamy peach water. A week after this strange incident, Sato was still thinking about Kojima's bouncy breasts. His friend Suzuki noticed he was thoughtful and asked what was wrong. Sato then answered by telling Suzuki he was thinking of solutions to fix his horrible face. However, Suzuki told him that he was born that way, so he shouldn't worry. Sato replied saying he was his friend, so the least he could do was worry about his appearance. After saying that, Sato stood up, telling Suzuki he was going to the infirmary, so he wouldn't have to watch the next class. As he walked to the infirmary, he bumped into another attractive teacher named Mayu, apologized, and left. Meanwhile, upon entering, Sato almost lost his soul when he found none other than Kojima, lying on the bed wearing only her melon cloak. Upon seeing him, she asked why he was seeing his ugly face again, since class should be in session. So, Sato lied that he had sprained his foot and needed treatment. With that, Kojima revealed she had a very high fever, so she asked to help get some medication as she was having trouble moving. So Sato rushed to the shelf to find some medicine, but the only one he could find could only be inserted from behind. With no other option, Kojima arched better than anyone on the site, asking him to help with the insertion, but asked him not to look too much at her rear. The first hole he inserted the pill into was only meant for black sticks, so she asked him to go higher. With that, he finally inserted the medicine, making Kojima scream in a moment of ecstasy. Suddenly, Mayu entered the infirmary. So Sato immediately hid under the blanket while still enjoying the teacher's exclusive benefits. After Mayu left, Kojima thanked Sato for his help, but warned him to leave because in her state of pleasure he might catch a cold. However, it was too late, as the boy caught a cold the next day and was lying in the infirmary bed. Shortly after, Kojima entered to check on him and then furiously demanded to know why he had lied about spraining his foot the previous day. He wondered where she had heard that. She then revealed that Mayu had told her and then threatened to shove the same medicine up his rear tunnel as revenge. Days later, Sato entered a self-service laundry only to find Kojima there. She then revealed that it had started raining very heavily, soaking her on her way home. Seeing how revealing her shirt was, Sato suggested she use the dryer, but she angrily refused because that would mean she'd have to strip for the idiot. However, Sato then handed her his own shirt to cover up with, and she accepted. At that moment, the rain suddenly became intense. In that instant, Sato discovered that even though Kojima had always behaved like a radical feminist, she was a scared little girl inside. Kojima tried to deny it, but when lightning struck again, she immediately grabbed Sato's hand and pressed her six-pack against his skinny body. Suddenly, the power went out while her shirt was still in the dryer. So, Sato suggested looking for the circuit breaker. When he found it, it was quite high up. And since he was shorter than Kevin Hart, Kojima decided to help with the switch while he carried her on his shoulders. When he did this, he could feel the softness of her thighs, which was exciting him in more than one way. At that moment, thunder sounded again, which unbalanced him, lightly bumping into the shelf above and causing the slippery liquid detergent to spill on them. Sato then tried to adjust Kojima on his shoulder, but since her skin was oilier than Didi's, his hands ended up accidentally grabbing Kojima's buttocks. At that moment, the buttons on her shirt started to come loose. An event where, in fact, all of them came loose, revealing her beautiful huge melons. After that, Kojima suggested that she carry his weak shoulders, but Sato initially refused. However, he finally agreed, and as she did so, she felt his loaded Excalibur touching the back of her head. During the summer vacation, Sato visited his mother's family home but was horrified to find Kojima taking care of his sister. She then revealed that his mother had asked for her help to look after the girl, and since she was already visiting her parents, she had no reason to say no. However, Sato wondered if she could really take care of children, given how harsh she was. Kojima answered irritated, telling him she was an experienced babysitter. At that instant, when she tried to stop the little girl from crying, the poor soul feared for her life and cried as if it were the end of the world. With that, Kojima confessed that she was actually terrible at taking care of children. Although she had done everything to make children love her, they simply hated her. She further revealed that her parents were encouraging her to get married and start making good use of her uterus to give him grandchildren. Upon hearing this, Sato commented that, since she was the serious type, she would definitely have very demanding taste in men. Kojima answered saying that all she wanted was a young man who was good at taking care of people and amazing with children. However, at that moment, she realized she was describing Sato, so she started to glitch like an NPC, trying to explain that she wasn't referring to him. Soon after that, Kojima put on her skirt evil, but on the other hand, Sato was deeply absorbed in his wild imagination of her half-exposed glory. At that moment, Kojima started playing with the little girl. Suddenly, the little girl played devil's advocate by untying her melon covering, exposing Kojima's juicy fruits. In her attempt to cover herself hastily, Kojima accidentally pushed the little girl over. Seeing this, Sato immediately ran to save his sister, but ended up giving Kojima an awkward kissing session. Later that night, Sato's mother, Saki, thanked Kojima for helping to look after the children. After that, she suddenly started teasing Kojima about getting married and suggested Sato as the best candidate to be her partner. As she walked down the hallway, Kojima wondered how it was possible for her to date her student, but soon began reminiscing about the kiss they had earlier. The next day, Kojima was in Sato's room, so he asked why she was there. She answered saying she was brought to his room by his mother. At that moment, Saki entered the room informing them that they were celebrating Kojima's move to her new apartment. After saying that, Saki offered Kojima a glass of grape juice, which he drank and immediately passed out. Seeing this, Saki commented that she never knew the girl was a lightweight. On the other hand, Kojima was completely drunk. When Saki opened the photo album showing a picture of Kojima when she was much younger, Sato could have sworn he had seen her in some past life. However, Saki mentioned that Kojima was very shy back then and never imagined she would one day become a teacher. Upon hearing this, Kojima revealed it was all thanks to a child that she managed to mature so quickly. She then had a flashback to when she had just graduated and was walking home on the bridge. At that moment, she encountered a child who greeted her, but she ignored him because his face looked worse than broccoli. Suddenly, she noticed the boy was about to jump off the bridge, so she tried to save him but ended up falling into the water with him. Next, she cleaned the boy and asked why he had decided to throw away his useless life. The boy answered by telling her that he heard if he needed to grow up, he had to jump from the bridge into the river. Kojima answered by telling him that, even though he had heard about such a statement, no one could mature just by jumping off the bridge. However, she said it would be nice if it were actually true. Maybe that would really solve her problem of being socially awkward, and then she could manage to talk to people. The young boy then pointed out that they had been talking for a while, which really meant that after she had jumped off the bridge with him, she must have matured. Back to reality, Kojima then revealed that it was, in fact, because of that little man that she managed to achieve her dream of becoming a teacher. Upon hearing this story, Sato was mortified because, as it turned out, it was because of him that Kojima became the fierce teacher she was. Kojima then commented that she didn't even know the child's name. Upon hearing this, Saki was about to tell the truth, but Sato covered her mouth immediately. However, she finally revealed the truth to Kojima, that the little boy was Sato. Upon hearing this, Kojima immediately hugged Sato, saying she owed him a lot of gratitude and would like to do something to thank him. Saki then said she could start by taking care of. Then Saki whispered something in Kojima's ear that fried her neurons. After that, Saki told Sato that she loved Kojima so much and would actually like the girl to be her daughter-in-law, so that meant he had to act like a grown man and handle the situation. When he left the room, Kojima, still a bit drunk, grabbed Sato from behind, saying she would give him anything he wanted as a form of gratitude. Then she suddenly noticed his hot magazine and realized the boy was a pair who loved juicy melons. With that, she unbuttoned her shirt, took off her melon armor, revealed her vanilla buns, and then asked him to play with him as he wished. However, Sato immediately covered his eyes, saying he couldn't violate his teacher. But Kojima told him that at school she was his teacher, but outside of school he should refer to her as Big Sister. With that, she continued to tease him, asking him to give her buns a little squeeze. But at that moment, his little sister and Saki were approaching his room. So Sato thought it best to give her a quick kiss, but hesitated upon remembering she was still his teacher and if anyone found out. But at that instant, Kojima grabbed his head, kissing him intensely. Suddenly, Saki and the little girl entered the room to find them in the censored act. At that moment, Saki immediately took the little girl to watch Cocomelon, leaving Sato and Kojima to continue enjoying the adult content. Several weeks later, Sato was invited to his mother's friend's wedding on a tropical island, and surprisingly, his teacher was also invited. With that, he asked his mother how on earth Kojima got invited to the party. Saki answered by telling him that, since his useless father, built like a gorilla, couldn't attend, she had decided to give an extra ticket to Kojima. She added that Kojima would soon be part of the family. Upon hearing this, Sato wondered if his mother was on some medication. However, Saki called him a dense fool and then revealed to him that Kojima had intense feelings for him, which shocked Sato. After that, Saki mentioned that the trip was the perfect opportunity for them to connect, so she needed to give them some space. After saying that, she sped off with the little girl at an incredible speed. At that moment, Kojima approached Sato, suggesting they have some fun before the wedding started. Thus, they went to a secluded spot on the island. But upon arriving there, Sato was distant, lost in thought about what his mother had told him about Kojima having feelings for him. At the same time, Kojima then asked him to apply sunscreen to her back. So she immediately took off her armor and Sato started applying the sunscreen, gently massaging all over her back. As soon as he reached the base of her neck, Kojima felt a wonderful sensation that took her to the realm of the angels. So she didn't know when she accidentally confessed that she loved him, leaving both in great shock. She turned around suddenly, and Sato found his cultured hands holding her mass distraction weapon once again, which embarrassed her. So she jumped into the ocean in an attempt to escape the awkward situation. At that moment, she remembered that she didn't know how to swim and almost lost her life. Shortly after, she was out of the ocean, but revealed to Sato that she had been bitten by something while in the water. At that instant, they noticed a warning sign about sea snakes in the area. Upon seeing this, Kojima began to panic. So Sato offered to suck out her venom. However, his eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when Kojima revealed the location where she had been bitten. But with no other option, Sato positioned her in the perfect pose for plot development and began sucking just below her dam until she sang the Song of the Angels. Then she passed out. Kojima was promptly taken to the hospital, but fortunately, according to Saki, no snake venom was found in her system. With that, she informed them that the wedding ceremony had started, so they needed to hurry there, and then she left. At that moment, Kojima thanked Sato for saving her life. After that, they went to the wedding. When they opened the reception door, they found the bride and groom exchanging solemn vows. At that moment, Sato mentioned that after he graduated, he would love to come back to the island with her. Several hours later, when they returned from the wedding, Kojima had a few drinks with her best friend, Miyu, and narrated everything that happened at the wedding. At that moment, Sato's call came through. So she answered the phone and they began talking like a couple, which made Miyu jealous. Then, in that jealous moment, Miyu grabbed the phone thinking of calling Suzuki, but realized she didn't have his number. The next day at school, during lunch, Suzuki was shocked to discover that Sato and Kojima were dating, but Sato instructed him not to tell anyone about it. At that moment, Sato got up to leave, saying he was going to have lunch with Kojima, leaving Suzuki alone to eat by himself. Suzuki had a history. When he tried to befriend other boys, they would simply run away because his face was worse than Dracula's. However, just as Suzuki thought he would have to eat alone, Miyu approached him offering to eat with him, taking him by surprise. He then asked her if she wasn't afraid of his scary face. So Miyu held his hands, telling him that even if his face was more disgusting than public bathrooms, she could never be afraid of her student, which made the big guy cry. With that, they had lunch together, and it was then that Mayu realized Suzuki was better in the kitchen than most Michelin chefs. So she suggested they share lunch because hers tasted like sewage. However, while trying to give him her horrible food, she tripped and fell into the fountain water. Suzuki tried to catch her, but ended up pulling the teacher's skirt. So he quickly tried to lift her out of the water, but ended up positioning her for applause. He then tried to adjust her, but only made the situation worse by activating the faucet, making the water hit the G-spot, causing the girl to feel all kinds of emotions. After this embarrassing incident, Suzuki apologized and handed Mayu his sweater to replace her wet blouse, which she took and sniffed like an obsessive pervert. Sometime later, in the teacher's locker room, Kojima noticed Mayu was wearing Suzuki's sweater all afternoon and asked if she had a crush on the boy. However, Mayu denied it faster than Eminem would drop a rhyme in a rap. She lied, saying she was just offering him support for his lack of friends. Soon after, Suzuki's transit pass fell out of the sweater. So Mayu found herself on a crowded train with Suzuki to return the pass to him. However, the situation soon became awkward, like a cat trying to swim, because Mayu's sweater somehow got stuck in the door, and while trying to pull it free, she ended up giving Suzuki a nice hug. Suzuki was shocked, wondering what was happening, and instantly Mayu hugged him tightly. It was then he realized Mayu's melons were loose, pressing against his chest. With that, he tried to prevent the strangers on the train from seeing what was happening. So Mayu quickly turned to the window to button her sweater, but it suddenly became very tight, pressing her firmly against the window. It got even tighter and impossible for her to button the sweater. And when Suzuki tried to close them, it was difficult. So he strained harder, making Mayu sing like a little bird. Finally, he managed to button the coat messily, which caught the attention of the officer at the train station. The man asked if Mayu had been a victim of harassment because, due to their facial appearance, he could tell they weren't a couple. Upon hearing this, Mayu held Suzuki's hand, pretending they were indeed a couple, just to clear up the accusation. Soon after, Suzuki ran into Mayu at a convenience store in the city center. He asked what she was doing there, and she revealed she lived nearby with her younger sister. Suzuki then explained he was there to get some lucky bags for his younger brother and sister. Mayu also revealed she bought one for her sister, even though she told her not to because it was childish. Upon leaving the store, they noticed it was raining, but luckily Suzuki's younger siblings, Suzu and Rei, brought him an umbrella. With that, Suzuki suggested Mayu share the umbrella with him since her house was nearby. As they walked home, the children were eager to see the lucky bag items Suzuki brought them. So he showed them a panda toy and a goldfish. Upon seeing the goldfish, Suzu got angry with him because she wanted a panda just like the one Rei got. So Mayu offered to trade the goldfish for the panda she bought for her sister. Hearing this, the little girl happily threw the little goldfish into the air, but somehow it found its way inside Mayu's divine valley, vibrating the tip and causing her an intense sensation. At that moment, Rei pointed out that a truck was coming. So Suzuki shielded everyone, but the umbrella handle had a mind of its own, making Mayu scream. Then, after the truck passed, Mayu immediately ran home before they noticed her wet paws. The following night, Sato came to the bar to pick up Kojima after she got completely drunk from drinking so much. On the other hand, Mayu was sad and alone because she had no man who would come running like a fool at her call. At that moment, she had a flashback to years ago when she was late for her teaching interview. So she ran to the location. Suddenly, she tripped and fell, throwing all her credentials on the ground and damaging her shoe in the process. At that moment, Suzuki appeared out of nowhere, offering to carry her on his back to the location, which initially scared her, but she eventually accepted. So with lightning speed, Suzuki sped off to the university, which surprised Mayu, who never thought the ugly guy with the face of a failed drug lord could be so considerate. Soon they finally arrived at the university, and Suzuki helped fix her damaged shoe. Upon seeing how considerate the ugly guy was, Mayu's heart began to race, and she fell head over heels for him. In the present, Mayu suddenly found herself on Suzuki's back, which startled her. She wondered why she was riding on him. So Suzuki explained that he had received a call from Sato to come pick her up. Upon hearing this, she remembered how kind Suzuki had been back when they first met. Even though she didn't confess how she truly felt about him, she nevertheless thanked him for his effort in always taking care of her. A few weeks later, Suzuki, Mayu, and her sister Saya arrive at the neighboring school to plan the next high school festival. There they met a boy who looked like a frog named Akashi, a student at the school and part of the planning committee. Suddenly, a wild girl leaped onto him, strangling his neck as if he were a toy. Takashi then informed the group that the girl was his teacher Hazakura, also the committee advisor. Later that day, Takashi arrived home exhausted from putting up with so much from his teacher. However, when he entered his room, he almost wet himself when he found Hazakura lying on his bed. He asked what the hell she was doing in his room, and she replied saying the heater in her apartment was broken, so she came to relax in his room. After saying that, she took him by the hand and dragged his huge head to her breasts. It turned out these two idiots were neighbors who had lived in the same apartment building since they were children. They were childhood friends, and while they were small, Hazakura used this boy as her personal toy. And even now that they were grown up, nothing had changed. In the present, Takashi tried to pull away from her grip but only revealed her unbuttoned and exposed melon covering. Startled, he tried to fasten it but only made things worse when the full glory sprang out. This full-body movement alerted Hazakura, so she unconsciously pressed his face harder against her chest. Takashi then tried to free himself, and as he pushed back, his mouth pushed in the opposite direction. Seconds later, Hazakura finally woke from her deep sleep, and just as Takashi expected her to react upon seeing the idiot's face on her breasts, she just patted his head, saying she liked it. Later, she got up and left his room. On the other hand, Takashi was delighted that Hazakura wasn't angry. So he supposed it was because she still saw him as a child and not as an adult. At the same time, outside the bedroom door, Hazakura was shocked and couldn't believe the boy had just run a train on her breasts. She concluded that his male instinct must have been triggered, and with that, she might end up being dominated by her junior, which she swore would never happen. Later that night, Hazakura took Takashi shopping. So Takashi assumed they were at the mall to buy toys but nearly had a brain seizure when he found himself in the lingerie section. Petrified, he tried to run out of the mall, but Hazakura pinned his weak rear to the ground as usual and then forced him to choose one for her. With no choice, Takashi immediately picked the first one his hand touched and handed it to her. While in the dressing room, Hazakura looked at the outfit, wondering if the boy had perhaps chosen the boldest one of all. She thought it was a form of rebellion from the little man, so she put it on to show she never backs down. Minutes later, Takashi asked if she was done, and before she could answer, the rat man grabbed her by the hand and started running out of the mall with all of Hazakura's feminine attributes fully on public display. They finally reached the escalator. It was then that Takashi realized his sensei was truly in full live mode. He tried to close her coat but only ended up enhancing her attributes. Hours later, while waiting, Takashi apologized for his insensitive actions. So Hazakura patted his head, rested it against her tremors, and said that she had actually already forgiven him and forgotten the incident. She also pointed out that they were now adults, so she understood. After saying that, Hazakura went out to get a drink at the bar. As she left, Takashi momentarily pondered her words and realized they were indeed adults. He thought about how in the past Hazakura wasn't embarrassed by what he did to her, but now she was. Days later, the students embarked on an extracurricular class in mountains. Suddenly, Hazakura appeared, and Takashi immediately hid. After that incident at the mall, Takashi was very conscious of Hazakura. However, at that moment, Hazakura approached him to find out why he was acting strange. But Takashi suddenly slipped while on a rock, sending them both tumbling into the stream. Soon after, it started raining heavily, so they hid in a cave to dry off. At that moment, Hazakura complained about the weather being too cold but noticed the young man had already turned into a frozen fish. At that moment, she knew she needed to do something immediately, or Takashi could go sub-zero to nirvana. Instantly, she remembered something she had watched on TV and thought it would be the perfect moment to try it. So without wasting time, she took off their clothes and asked Takashi to come closer so they could warm up together. Without hesitation, the cultured and kind lord approached, enjoying the luxurious skin-to-skin contact. After that, Takashi murmured that he was thirsty, and just then, his eyes spotted a drop of creamy water on Hazakura's melodic paradise. So he quickly put his mouth gently and sucked softly, causing Hazakura to go into panic mode. Hazakura then tried to give him some tea, but her trembling hand tipped over, spilling the tea on her naked body. Seeing the liquid on her body, Takashi licked it all up, even extending his tongue over her peaches, making the girl scream his name. After that, she laid his head on her thighs and stroked his hair, which triggered a flashback for Takashi of how Hazakura had always taken care of him. Even though most of the time she threw caution to the wind and played with him roughly, she was actually incredibly kind to him when he needed it. With that, Takashi looked into her eyes, mentioning to Hazakura that he loved her, which surprised her. The day of the joint school festival finally arrived, and the entire school was bustling with students. It was then that Suzuki ran into Mayu in the hallway, which made him wonder what she was doing dressed as a student. He asked why she was in a school uniform, to which Mayu replied, saying she did it as a disguise to blend in seamlessly with the crowd. However, the truth was that she had done it hoping to make Suzuki feel more comfortable around her and not see her as his teacher. While walking through the hallway, they suddenly bumped into Hazakura, who suggested they try out the program she had created for the event. The program was called Cops and Robbers, and the goal was to find a criminal while running around the school. After saying that, she handcuffed Mayu and whispered in her ear, saying that she must have strong feelings for Suzuki to go on a date, even going so far as to dress like a student. Then she led them into a room and informed them that the handcuff key was on top of a shelf. With that, Suzuki climbed up to get it, but clumsily dropped it inside Mayu's blouse, which tore on the inside, exposing her enormous breasts, and the key ended up inside her panties. At that moment, Suzuki ran around looking for the key, but then Sayo arrived at the door, calling his name. Upon hearing Sayo's voice outside, Suzuki and Mayu panicked, and Mayu quickly asked Suzuki to close his eyes and put his hand inside her panties to retrieve it. He tried to do it but ended up grabbing her first-class breasts. Fortunately, he finally got the key, though not without giving her breast a good feel. Afterwards, Suzuki apologized for his actions, and Mayu replied that although others might say the things he did were similar to what only movie stars would do, she had actually enjoyed them. After saying that, in a moment of distraction, she confessed that she truly loved him, shocking Suzuki. However, she immediately regained her senses and ran out of the room. At that moment, Suzuki was in disbelief that Mayu loved him, but with the student-teacher relationship, their love was forbidden. A few minutes later, Suzuki left the room depressed about his situation, but at that moment he suddenly noticed that Sato and Takashi were busy applauding their teachers. Later that day, Mayu asked Sayu and Takashi to patrol an old school building that was to be used as a haunted house for the festival. Although Sayu was hesitant because the place was scary, Takashi was very eager to start, which made Hazakura extremely jealous because Takashi was acting so cool and masculine as if he intended to win over Sayu. With that, she entered the house ahead of them intending to scare Takashi so that Sayu would see who he really was, a chicken without courage. However, while running into the building, she accidentally fell to the ground. Eventually, Takashi and Sayu found her in that pitiful state and scolded her for behaving carelessly. Sayu then suggested they go get help, but as they moved, Hazakura grabbed Takashi's leg, begging him not to leave her. At that instant, Takashi also fell to the ground with her and saw her genitalia in detail. Suddenly, Hazakura informed Takashi that she needed to urinate, and he tried to lift her, but the plan failed miserably. At that moment, Hazakura warned that she was about to let everything go. So Takashi had the brilliant idea, worthy of 1,000 memes, to catch the liquid using a bucket, which he did. At that instant, Saya returned with Suzuki to help, and when they heard the sound of falling water, they thought it had suddenly started to rain. After that, Hazakura felt utterly embarrassed and thought the best way to relieve the tension was to embarrass Takashi too by getting him wet, but when she grabbed his hand, the boy completely ignored her, walking away with Suzuki and Sayu, leaving her puzzled and believing that Takashi was done with her games. On the other hand, Takashi was just embarrassed and didn't want to look at her pathetic state, thinking it best to leave her alone. A few minutes later, in the school hallway, a girl was confessing her love to a boy, but suddenly a bear mascot arrived as the devil's advocate, ruining the moment. At the same time, outside the building, Saya ran to find Mayu and Takashi. She informed them that a bear mascot was on a rampage through the school, disturbing couples in their moments of affection, and also revealed a surprise. Couples who were hit by the mascot had a high chance of success when declaring their feelings. At that instant, a group of students spotted the mascot and ran after it, and Saya then turned and noticed that her sister had also disappeared to chase it. Takashi, on the other hand, already had an inkling of who was behind the whole mascot fiasco. Meanwhile, inside the physical education preparation room, the mascot finally took off the mask and turned out to be Hazakura, who was busy getting revenge on the students for what Takashi had done to her earlier. Suddenly, Takashi entered the room, shocking Hazakura, who wondered how the dense idiot had managed to figure out she was the face behind a costume. He answered that he knew it was her because she had a distinct, unpleasant smell worse than morning breath. At that moment, they heard the sound of the students outside still looking for the mascot, so Hazakura pushed Takashi into the other room. Inside, she looked for him but couldn't find him, and soon discovered he was right inside her costume. Takashi, in turn, realized that Hazakura wasn't wearing panties, which utterly embarrassed her, and she explained that the panties had gotten dirty, so she had to hang them up. After that, Takashi tried to get out from inside the mascot but ended up rubbing his body against hers. Hazakura immediately asked him to stop, but the pervert said he simply couldn't stop his body from reacting to the person he was in love with. After that, Takashi was utterly embarrassed by the awkward way he had confessed his feelings to Hazakura. Soon after, Sayu and Suzuki entered the room, with Sayu scolding Hazakura for playing with the costume again and informing them that the haunted house was ready. Upon hearing this, Takashi thought about going with them, but Hazakura held his hand, saying he belonged to her. While this was happening, Maya was still looking for the mascot. When she thought she saw something that looked like the mascot's big feet, she threw herself at the person and declared her love for Suzuki. However, when she looked up, she was shocked to realize she had just confessed her feelings to Suzuki himself. He, after hearing the declaration, said he was just a student with no money and no ambition in life, but that he would really love to marry her, deeply shocking Mayu and leaving her instantly unconscious. Weeks later, in the cafeteria, a guy named Tan was shocked to hear that the three of them were sleeping with their teachers. To make matters worse, Sato and Suzuki, from the same school, were applauding their teachers. Sato then revealed that even the freshmen Tanaka and Takashi were the newest members of the Cougars, surprising Tan. With that, the brother vowed that he would also find a cougar within the next 3 months before graduating, and ran off crying about how miserable his life was. Later that day, while carrying out his duties as a chief with his colleagues, his boss ordered him to take the used cooking oil away, which he did. On the way, he bumped into the school nurse named Tachibana and clumsily spilled oil all over her shirt. He immediately offered to give her his extra shirt, but the girl, with a cold face, said she would rather do that with Shrek than hear him apologize, shocking him. Tachibana had always been so cold and wild, even as a school nurse. However, Tanaka threw himself before her, apologizing, and then handed her the shirt. After a period of not speaking to him, Tachibana took the shirt and then took hers off, remaining only in her underwear. At that moment, Tanaka knew he had to leave. As he got up, he accidentally slipped on the oily shirt, causing his hands, by accident, to lift the armor of her plot, exposing those plump twins. Tachibana immediately asked him to get off her, and when he tried to stand up, the idiot slipped again, and this time grabbed her soft plot. Afterwards, he apologized for being clumsy, but noticed the girl was strangely calm about it all. The next day at school, Tachibana confided in Hazakura that she desperately wanted to become friends with the students, and then begged for her advice. Hazakura then advised her to change her cold expression because no one could tell what she was thinking, and all she needed to do was put some expression on her face. Furthermore, she advised that the first step she needed to take to become friends with the students was to learn about them. She suggested she find a student she could easily get along with. And at that moment, Tachibana thought of a previous incident with Tanaka. So with that, on Christmas Day, she found her way to his crib, dressed in a Santa Claus costume. Upon seeing her, Tanaka wondered what she was doing in his house and why she was recording a video of him. Tachibana said she wanted to familiarize herself with her students and was recording so she wouldn't miss even the smallest details. Hearing this, Tanaka wondered why she had chosen him for the experiment. Tachibana replied that since he was the only loser on planet Earth who would be alone on Christmas Day, she assumed it wouldn't bother him too much. After that, Tanaka suggested they start by learning about her. So, Tachibana devoted herself to a screen presentation about her childhood. Even as a child, Tachibana always had that same cold facial expression and also exhibited psychotic tendencies by writing her name on everything she owned. However, Tanaka asked to know a more recent version of her. So, she showed him a video from the previous year when she was alone on Christmas Day. She then revealed to Tanaka that she loved Christmas, and since leaving her parents' house, she had been feeling lonely. With that, she was happy not to have to spend Christmas alone. Upon hearing this, Tanaka was surprised and thought this girl must have feelings for him to choose to spend Christmas with him. So he offered to record her, but when he took the camera, he recorded her plans first, which appeared on the TV screen. Suddenly, the cake on the table almost fell. So Tachibana made a quick defense like Catwoman but ended up giving this boy more than he asked for. After the bizarre moment, Tachibana informed Tanaka that she was leaving and then handed him a Christmas present. Tanaka collected the present and then gave her one. He revealed he had planned to give the present to anyone he had successfully asked out. So Tachibana took it and unwrapped it, revealing a teddy bear that she loved. And as usual, she immediately scribbled her name on it, as she did in the childhood video. However, upon leaving, Tanaka opened the present she had given him, only to be extremely surprised to discover the girl had bought him something purple and elastic. Days later, Tanaka and Tachibana went together to an island. It turned out that before this, Tanaka had helped Tachibana carry her heavy load. Because of that, she promised to reward him with whatever she won from the lottery tickets she bought. Tanaka tried to tell her she didn't need to, but the girl stubbornly replied that she had to do it. Unable to convince her, Tanaka then suggested they split the prize 50-50, to which she agreed. So when she presented the lottery ticket, it surprisingly turned out she had won a pair of all-expenses-paid trip tickets to the island. Back to the present, as Tanaka continued to look at Tachibana, he couldn't help but wonder if she really had feelings for him, considering she voluntarily shared her tickets with him. But then Tachibana suddenly grabbed his hands and took him to a beautiful, fun lake. Without wasting time, she took off her blouse and shorts, revealing her swimwear that almost blew the guy's mind. She then pointed out that she wanted to play in the sea, but at that moment Tanaka showed her a sign saying swimming wasn't allowed for now, which made her sad. Seeing her sad, Tanaka quickly told her they could also play at the shore. He then showed her hermit crab crawling on the beach, which fascinated Tachibana. Suddenly, Tachibana slipped and fell into the sea, which made her peach covering slip out of position. Seeing this, Tanaka took off his shirt and dove into the water to save her. While carrying her to the beach, he almost died upon seeing a mature woman's rear for the first time in his life. Fortunately, he managed to lift her up, but another problem arose when her melon covering was removed and the hermit crab thought it was better to play with something soft than the hard ground. Panicking, Tachibana fell backwards, explaining to Tanaka that the hermit crab had taken over her watermelons. So Tanaka moved his hands up to remove the crab, but this stupid boy ended up squeezing the armed cannon, making this girl climax intensely. Afterwards, they got dressed, and it was then that Tanaka spotted the magazine Tachibana was reading. He then asked her if she had researched fun places at sea for his sake. Tachibana confirmed with a nod, saying she did it so the trip wouldn't be boring for him because all she wanted was for him to have fun, impressing Tanaka. At that instant, Tanaka's heart began to beat faster than a cheetah on steroids, and he wondered what was causing the intense feeling. The next day on the island, Tanaka finally concluded that the intense feeling was because he was in love with Tachibana. On the other hand, Tachibana suggested they go to the mountain to observe the stars. So while climbing the mountain, it suddenly started raining heavily. So they sought shelter inside a cave. While inside, Tanaka complained about the cold. So Tachibana moved closer, placing her cushions on him so he felt warmer than a microwave. But suddenly, Tanaka slipped, causing them to fall to the bottom of the cave. With that, Tanaka then used a flashlight to see the depth of the hole. But it was then that he noticed an even deeper hole ahead of him. He immediately tried to move away from the situation, but Tachibana immediately asked him not to move, warning that if he moved abruptly, he could destroy the stalactites that took years to grow. So she suggested they move slowly, and as she began the slow movement, all Tachibana did was give him more manga poses. After finally getting out of the hole, the sky cleared and the rain stopped falling. It was then that they noticed the small stars illuminating the cave. However, Tachibana mentioned she only wanted to see a shooting star. Tanaka responded by asking if she wanted to make a wish to be loved by her student, to which she shyly nodded in agreement. Seeing this, Tanaka laughed and murmured to himself, saying the teacher really had deep feelings for him. But then he had no idea that his internal dialogue was quite loud and Tachibana heard it. She then revealed to him that it was actually the first time her student had loved her, shocking Tanaka because he never expected that she still saw him only as a mere student and not as a real man. On Valentine's Day, Takashi showed Tanaka the chocolate he had received from Hazakura as a gift, shocking Tanaka. So Tanaka hoped to receive the same VIP treatment from Tachibana, but he received nothing by the end of the day, which left him very frustrated. After school that day, he decided to go home but noticed it was snowing heavily and even the buses and trains had stopped running. Anyway, he decided to walk home in the freezing cold, But it was then that he heard someone's tumble behind him, which turned out to be Tachibana. With that, the two went back inside the school and sat by the heater to keep warm. However, at that moment, Tachibana caught a cold and started sneezing, so she took off her clothes to feel warmer. Just then, Tanaka noticed the same box of chocolate that Takashi had shown him on the floor. So he presumed Tachibana had also received the same Valentine's Day gift from Hazakura. However, at that moment, Tachibana started sneezing even more strongly. So Tanaka suggested she eat the chocolate to warm up, to which she agreed, but only if he ate with her. So upon opening the chocolate box, she took one and accidentally slipped her hand, and it fell on her tips, immediately melting. Seeing this, Tanaka got up to get a cloth to clean the mess but ended up putting his mouth gently on the tips. Seeing this, Tachibana told him it was okay, since it was the chocolate she had planned to give him anyway as a Valentine's Day present, which she had made with Hazakura. Upon hearing this, Tanaka became totally convinced that Tachibana really had feelings for him, and that it was a perfect moment to reveal his feelings. So he told her that, just as he had said on the island before, he had really fallen in love with her, and was in love with her. But surprisingly, Tachibana immediately rejected him. Several months later, Tanaka graduated, and his friends came to his party to celebrate with him. Sato then informed him that they were planning to take a trip during spring break, and had come to discuss the planning. But it turned out these boys' teachers were also in the apartment baking a cake in the kitchen. Upon seeing them, Tanaka then wondered what Tachibana was doing in his crib after rejecting him like a piece of trash. At that moment, the liquid batter suddenly spilled on Tachibana's shirt. So Hazakura instructed Tanaka to give her his shirt to change into. With that, Tanaka gave his sweatshirt to Tachibana and left the room while Tachibana tried to figure out the best way to express her feelings for him. However, she took her clothes off, and while trying to put on the sweatshirt, she accidentally got entangled with a fishing line that had somehow gotten stuck to the door. Seeing this, Tanaka, who peeked through the door upon hearing her fall, ran to get scissors, leaving the door partially open. But then Takashi and Hazakura approached the room to check on them. Hearing their voices in the hallway, Tachibana moved to close the door so they wouldn't see her OnlyFans content, but it was impossible. At that moment, they were almost at the door when Tanaka emerged from nowhere holding scissors, diving into the room like Spider-Man and closing the door behind them. With that, he cut the line and Tachibana hugged him. She revealed she could finally date him since he was no longer her student. She said she loved him and had always wanted to confess her feelings since Valentine's Day, but he was still a student back then. This revelation made Tanaka so happy that he informed the crew about the latest development. When spring finally arrived, the boys and the teachers they were pursuing went on the planned trip, enjoying life to the fullest under the cherry blossoms.